And I'll start sharing again. Can you all see the presentation? Okay. Okay, so this is the continuation of our monthly webinar series, and today I'm going to talk about the spiritual side. This is the fifth part, and this is about, I title it Making God Great Again, but God in the context of making reality and truth great again. So this is, again, as I said, it's the fifth one, and next month will be the last, and that's about the economy. The previous 4 webinars and the recordings can be found at climatehealers.org/webinar, and all this, the PowerPoint presentations are also there, so you can download and use it as you wish. Now, Mahatma Gandhi said 100 years ago that truth is God. Reality is God. That all that is good in the world is all that is true. So I am going to speak to you in that context of making God great again, making reality become much more in alignment with who we are and what we do on this planet. I also want to show you, I also want to try and frame the story as the Bhagavad Gita says, that everything happens for the best. So if everything happens for the best, then everything must have happened for the best in the past as well. So we need to tell a story about our past, our history, and what we are doing today in this context. The Gita also says just what Mahatma Gandhi had said earlier. It is, the truth never isn't. So the truth is the one that is always is, and the untruth never is. So it also, Bhagavad Gita also, formulates God as truth. And even from a technological standpoint, Richard Feynman had said after he did the analysis of the Challenger disaster, for a successful technology, and I really mean for a successful civilization of humanity, reality must take precedence over public relations. For nature cannot be fooled. So nature is always about implementing the truth. So nature doesn't care that we don't buy into the truth and we are pretending that something else is true. So for us to get into alignment with nature and for us to get into alignment with and have a successful civilization, a sustainable civilization, we need to come into alignment with what is true. What are the facts? And this is the basis of all religion as well. Compassion and truth drive every major religion on the planet. So we had an interfaith declaration on climate change way back in 2011 at COP17. And it was signed by so many religious leaders, including Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And we presented it to Christiana Figueres, the executive director, I guess she's the executive director of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change at that time. And in that, we signed this addendum, which basically said that while climate change is a symptom, the fever that our Earth has contracted, the underlying disease is the disconnection from creation, or really the disconnection from reality that plagues human societies throughout our Earth. And we, the undersigned, pledge to heal this disconnection by promoting and exemplifying compassion for all creation in all our actions. The idea here is that any disconnection from reality or disconnection from creation is a misalignment in who we really are. And when you have that misalignment, you're going to suffer. So people are suffering when we have this disconnection in our society. And so to overcome or alleviate the suffering, you really have to show compassion. The compassion for all creation in all our actions. And every religious leader who was there signed on to this, saying that this is fundamental to our religion. So all religions seem to agree that compassion for all creation is the way forward, is the way to a kind society. And this is in alignment with our true nature, which is the message of our new documentary, A Prayer for Compassion, which has been shown in several cities now. It's premiered in Los Angeles last week, and it was and basically has been very well received in all our premieres. So the main message of this is that when you look at every religion says that compassion for all creation is the foundation of our religion. And so this means when we get to a compassionate society, we have a shot at becoming sustainable, and which is really in alignment with our true nature. Alignment with our true nature. So this is something that I ask every school that I go to and I give talks. I ask the kids, would you ever deliberately hurt an innocent animal unnecessarily? And 100% of them so far have said, no, absolutely not. And at that point, I tell them, by definition, all of you are vegan. Because that's the definition of veganism, that you would never deliberately hurt an innocent animal unnecessarily. So it wakes them up into realizing that that is their true nature. Their true nature is in alignment with veganism as it's practiced today. And we are told stories to overcome our true nature. And those stories have to do with the parsing of this question. So some people, like the Dalai Lama, for instance, and some Buddhists, they use the word deliberately. They say, well, we didn't deliberately hurt that animal. Someone else did it. And so we are just eating the product of what someone else had hurt. So it's not our fault that the animal was killed. So that's how they justify their consumption of animal foods, using the word deliberate. Now we have to tell them, look, when we buy or when we eat, when we consume an animal product that someone else had hurt, that causes a chain reaction where someone will go and say, okay, I need to replace that product. And so therefore, you're really ordering a hit on another animal to be killed to replace the product that you just ate. So therefore, you are deliberately hurting an innocent animal unnecessarily when you eat, even though you didn't hurt that animal directly yourself. So that's how we need to counter that, because otherwise they use that parsing of this question to justify to themselves why they are not, why they're still consistent with this, with answering no to this, and yet they're eating animal foods. Some people would use unnecessarily. They'll parse that word and say, well, it's necessary for me to eat animal foods because I need the protein. So this buys into the protein myth. So to them, you have to show them, that protein is available in other foods. And so therefore, it's really not necessary for us to eat animal foods. So that's how the cognitive dissonance is being maintained in society, because 100% of the people that I've spoken to so far have said they would never deliberately hurt an innocent animal unnecessarily. So there is some parsing going on in this question gets to the root of how they are justifying to themselves. And it's only by overcoming their justification that we can help them change. So the misalignment with nature has been recognized, by all the major religions in their declaration. So in their declarations on climate change, the Catholic religion, Pope Francis said, "Our sister now cries out to us because of the harm we have inflicted by our irresponsible use and abuse of the goods with which God has endowed her." So the Pope and the Catholic Church has recognized that we are in misalignment with nature. And therefore, something needs to change. So they have recognized that something needs to change for us to come into alignment. The same with the Islamic Declaration on Climate Change, which says our species, though selected to be a caretaker or steward on the earth, has been the cause of such corruption and devastation on it that we're in danger of ending life as we know it on our planet. So they've also recognized that something needs to change, that something's not right in our current relationship with nature. The same with the Hindu Declaration on Climate Change. In fact, if we look at all of these major religions that have had declarations on climate change, Judaism, Jewish religion, Buddhist religion, they all say the same thing, that we are in misalignment right now, and therefore we need to change. So the question is, what is this change? And we need to sort of get to the root of it and show them why our relationship with other life is the foundation of this change that needs to happen. And this is again coming into alignment with who we really are. And every species in nature, or life as a whole, creates conditions conducive to life. So every species in nature works in alignment with this. And this is why nature flourishes when humans step off. But even this sanctuary that I went to in the Western Ghats of India, it was maintained by human beings. So there was a couple from New Jersey who went there, who built a house right in the middle of the sanctuary, and they're protecting like 200 or 300 acres of the sanctuary. And they protect it using technology. They use cameras to make sure that no poachers come inside. They use cameras to monitor that the wildlife is safe and that they're healthy. And so it's deploying the technology that we have created for the protection of all life. And these people are able to do it because they have security. So they have enough money in their bank account that they can live without having to worry about, getting their next meal. Whereas most people, including the poachers, the so-called poachers, they don't have any money, and so they are looking at every animal and seeing the animal as a dollar sign. So they're then, motivated to go kill that animal in order to make some money, right? So, which means that if we create conditions in us, in this new civilization in which everyone feels secure, then everyone can act like Pamela and Anil are doing and protect life. So that is the transformation that we need to be working on. And the core guiding principle for climate healers is this, that compassion for all life is infinitely sustainable. So, and that is where we are headed, because it's so sustainable. And that our true role, the ecosystem's role for human beings, is to be the thermostat species of planet Earth, so that we maintain the climate on Earth, we maintain the well-being of all life on Earth, and that will become our primary focus as we transform from where we are today to where we need to go. And this is part of this continuing saga of human beings. When we started off as prey, before we could control fire, we were literally like prey because we don't have big claws, we don't have big teeth, we don't have big defenses, we don't even climb trees too well. So we were easy prey for all the predators on the planet. And once we started controlling fire and started building our own weapons, we became powerful. And so therefore we started becoming predators. And today we are the top predators on the planet. So we've gone through this phase where we went from prey to predators. And now we have to become caretakers to have a viable future. So this transition from predators to caretakers is really a return home to who we really are, because that's who we were, as when we were prey, so to speak. This is returning to Eden that was there before we started doing our agriculture and all that. And it's returning back to who we are within ourselves. And using the technology that we have created to take care of our life, which is the example that Pamela and Anil show in their sanctuary. So, and this phase of becoming predators was essential for us to create all this technology. So in that sense, everything has happened for the best. So everything has happened exactly as life would have wanted it, if it wanted to thrive, right? So life just creates more complexity in response to environmental stresses. And so that's what it has created with us as a species. So the life's thermostat setting, we know, this is where we held it for the last 10,000 years. And this is where we are today. And obviously we're not going to continue doing what we're doing because if we do that, we're going to kill ourselves off. And that's really stupid. So we have to become the thermostat species. We have to become a conscious thermostat species and transition to a compassionate lifestyle so that we can bring the thermostat back to bring the temperature of the earth back to the thermostat setting, and then maintain that from that point on. But how did we become this predator species, and especially a super predator species that we are today? And so that, the origin of that to me is the vitamin B12 story. So we are one of the few species on Earth that washes its food. In fact, no other species does it consistently. We are the ones that consistently wash our food before eating. As a result, we don't get soil bacteria in our food. And soil bacteria is the source of vitamin B12. And until about 100 years ago, people used to get pernicious anemia, which is debilitating, which kills people, and which is really the lack of vitamin B12 in your food. And what people discovered is that if we eat a little bit of animal foods, we don't get pernicious anemia. So it became part of our culture to eat animal foods, some animal foods at least, so that everyone is healthy in society. Now, it was only in 1964 that Dorothy Hodgkin, discovered the structure of vitamin B12. And so actually vitamin B12 has caused 3 different Nobel Prizes to be awarded. The first was to 2 people in the 1920s, I think, for discovering that to be the source of pernicious anemia. And then Dorothy Hodgkin discovered the structure of vitamin B12, and she got the Nobel Prize in 1964 for doing that. And this enabled its industrial production. And this essentially is the reason why the vegan movement is able to thrive today. Because we know about vitamin B12, we have it now fortified in our plant-based milks, or we take supplements as we need it, so that we can overcome this deficiency that will be there when you wash your food. Now, the vitamin B12, the lack of vitamin B12 and it causing pernicious anemia created a lot of myths in our cultures surrounding animal foods. First of all, we realized that some animal food is absolutely essential for us to thrive. So that was an empirical observation, I'm sure, that our ancestors made. And so we had religious festivals, religious occasions which were centered around animal foods. So in the Hindu culture, it was all centered around using milk sweets and ghee-based sweets or clarified butter-based sweets. And that was associated with festivals like Diwali. And you were actually told, especially if you were a wealthy family, you were told to prepare these sweets and give them to everyone in your neighborhood, to give them to all the poor people in the neighborhood, so that everyone gets a little bit of animal foods at least once a year. Okay, so this is part of our culture, and this was, I think, done by our ancestors to make sure that everyone had a little bit of vitamin B12, no matter what their circumstances in life were. And the same thing in the Muslim cultures, where after the Ramadan 30 days of fasting, for the feast, they slaughter a goat. So especially the rich people who can afford to slaughter a goat, were supposed to slaughter a goat and then share that food with all the poor people in the neighborhood, so that everyone was getting a little bit of animal foods, and therefore if sufficient quantities of vitamin B12 in their diet. So that made, again, animal foods as something to be desired. I mean, because only rich people could afford to buy these animal foods and distribute them. So therefore, everyone was striving to be one of those who can afford to slaughter a goat, or who can afford to make milk sweets every day, or for festivals. And so this made animal foods as something to be prized. And so now this has become like a business. The sign of prosperity is eating more and more animal foods. The same thing for Easter. It's Easter dishes centered around ham. And again, this is about promoting in the consumption of animal foods at least once a year, because that was the amount that we were able to eat in the past. Today, we have taken over the whole planet, and we are so powerful as a species that we are able to eat it 3 times a day. And in the process, we are destroying the whole planet. And in the process, we are also forgetting why these rituals came into place. Maybe perhaps centered around vitamin B12. And perhaps we really don't need to do this anymore, because we know about vitamin B12. We know we can live without eating animal foods at all. Oops. So this created myths about animal foods. Like one of the myths in the Hindu culture is that milk is nectar. Milk is like nectar because milk was life-giving. You had to have a little bit of milk at least, occasionally, otherwise you will die, right? Or you will have debilitating diseases. So that was the source of that myth. But today, milk is not nectar. In fact, it's the exact opposite of nectar. It is filled with chemical pollution because it has a lot of fat, and most of our chemical pollution is fat soluble. So it sticks to fat cells. And so milk is highly contaminated. In fact, if you look at clarified butter and ghee or even butter, there are statistics showing that 94% of all ghee samples were contaminated in India. So it's highly contaminated today with all kinds of insecticides, pesticides, and pollutants. And the second myth was that meat is the only source of protein. So protein was considered to be this essential nutrient that everyone needs to have. And so people, instead of knowing about vitamin B12 and isolating that and saying that that is the reason why we all had to eat a little bit of meat, they said it's because meat is the source of protein. So this is how meat was marketed. But in reality, meat is not the only source of protein. We know that. In fact, beans are more protein than meat. And beans have lots of fiber. 70% of the calories in beans come from complex carbohydrates, whereas there's absolutely no fiber in meat. And as a result, beans are actually much healthier to eat for your protein intake. And you get more protein, actually, from a calorific standpoint. So because of what we have done to the environment now, we have to overcome these myths, because those myths are now false, completely false. So the toxins we are pouring out, and we have poured out into the environment 250 billion tons of toxins every year for the last 40, 50 years. And that is accumulating in the environment. And then when we eat animal foods, we get concentrated doses of these toxins. And as a result, we get chronic diseases, and the pharmaceutical industry comes in and gives us these procedures and these medications to overcome our chronic diseases. Chronic diseases are known to be the cash cows of the pharmaceutical industry. So we have created a money-based system that is using these toxins and persuading us to eat more animal foods in order to make money off of us. And so this has become a self-perpetuating spiral, death spiral for humanity, which we need to overcome by overcoming those myths that are underlying this, because the myths are false. And we have to understand the symbolism of our stories so that we see through these myths. The story of Krishna's stories are full of symbolism. Like Krishna lifts a mountain with his little finger when he was a child. And he used that to protect the people from the thunderstorms that was happening around them. And so the symbolism of the story is that if you believe in God and if you have faith, then he will shelter you. That will shelter you from the trials and tribulations of life. So that's the symbolism of the story. No one says, Krishna lifted a mountain with his little finger, so I really need to go and lift a mountain with my little finger, okay, to emulate Krishna. No one does that. We recognize that this story is symbolic. Same with Krishna dancing on the hood of a seven-headed snake. This literally means that he has overcome the seven chakras. He's opened the seven chakras. So he's overcome his fear, his guilt, shame, grief, lies, delusions, and attachments. Those are the seven chakras. It is open, and therefore he's able to play the flute. The flute has seven holes that are open. Okay, so that's the symbolism of Krishna playing the flute, standing on top of a seven-headed snake. And that's a story it's one of the Bhagavata Purana stories. And the third story is the story of Krishna loving butter. And so that again is meant to be taken symbolically. Krishna loves butter because butter represents our solid mind that has faith in God. He loves our solid mind that has faith in God, because milk is symbolic of the fluid mind that has doubts about God. And to milk, you add a little bit of curd, which is the thought of God, and then you let it ferment. The thought of God ferments in your fluid mind, and then you churn that, which is really like meditation. So you churn that, you get butter. So that is the solid mind that is fixed on God. And that's why Krishna loves butter. So we don't take the other stories, literally. We don't go around dancing on the hood of a seven-headed snake, because there are no seven-headed snakes around. We don't go lifting mountains with our little fingers. So then why are we taking the butter stories literally? So that's where the problem is. Someone has used the butter story to market these animal foods to us, and to say, okay, just because Krishna did it, you have to do it too. But when we understand the symbolism of the story, you see, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful story. And Krishna was a cowherd. He was born into a cowherd family, and he loved butter. And enlightenment, again, we use ghee in our lamps because the ghee is clarified butter. So that's the clarified solid mind that has faith in God. And therefore, that is enlightenment. Enlightenment literally is seeing reality as is, which means seeing things as they really are. And today we need to see that clarified butter or ghee contains all kinds of dioxins and other fat-soluble toxins. And that is the last thing we should be doing. You should be burning in front of God, so to speak, because that's unenlightened to be burning that. Even though the symbolism of ghee is the solid mind that's fixed on God. So if you want to keep the symbolism and not do something that is blatantly unenlightened, then I suggest that we can veganize this ritual. Rather than using clarified butter, you can use coconut oil in your Aarti. Because in all our pujas, in the Hindu pujas, we use a leaf to represent our body. We use flowers to represent our mind thinking of God. We use fruits to represent our soul. And we then use a coconut to represent our ego. So we offer our body, our mind, our soul to God, and then we break the coconut. So we break our ego, and out spills the coconut water, which is the fluid mind that has doubts about God. And what is left is the coconut fruit, which is the solid mind that's fixed on God. So if you take that coconut fruit and you refine that, you'll get coconut oil, which is this clarified solid mind fixed on God. And coconut is one of the purest fruits you can get, because water from the root of the coconut tree is drawn through the coconut tree in to become the coconut fruit. And all along the way, and coconut tree is one of the tallest trees that we know of, all along the way, the tree is filtering out the toxins. So by the time it gets to the coconut, it is as pure as you can get. This is why coconut water was used as a substitute for plasma during World War II, because it's known to be so pure. So coconut oil is one of the purest substances that we can use for lighting lamps and for signifying enlightenment. And so this way we are not offering a whole bunch of dioxins to our God when we do our puja. So this is all part of, and I keep repeating this particular slide in every one of my presentations, because this is the key. This is the greatest transformation in human history that's happening today. Okay, and the transformation is something that we do intentionally. And so veganism is something that we adopt intentionally. But it is a systemic transformation that needs to happen. And we need to understand that we are on the left-hand side right now. That is the situation that we are in. That's the system that we are in. So the system that's based on carnism and speciesism, which gives death and cruelty to animals, and diseases and division for human beings, and destroys the planet. It's based on a culture of consumption and a mindset of scarcity, and is driven by money. So that's the system we are in today, where we play the super predator role. So we are the top predator on the planet, and we have normalized violence in this system. And this is clearly unsustainable. And so when we talk about becoming sustainable, it's about transitioning from this system on the left to a system of normalized nonviolence, because only nonviolence is sustainable. And to transition from a predator to a caretaker species. And I think we deserve a new name for this, and so we'll become Homo ahimsa from Homo sapiens, where veganism is the foundation of this new system, where we show love and kindness for animals, and health and unity for humanity, and we regenerate the earth. And all of this is based on a culture of compassion. So it's really about creating a compassionate society and making compassion normal and making nonviolence normal, where everyone feels that abundance that Pamela and Anil feel, so that they can contribute to the well-being of the planet. So everyone has to have that mindset of abundance that should become normal in our society. And it should be a service-driven economy. So in the next webinar, I'm going to talk about how to create this kind of economy and that the basis of Vegan World 2026. But this is the spiritual shift that's going to happen. Shift from normalized violence to normalized compassion, normalized nonviolence. And it's really about fulfilling all of the things that they've been telling us in our religious texts. It's about implementing them seriously. So far, we have been just saying those words, but not really doing them. And unfortunately, because that's the system we are in, the system that's based on a whole bunch of myths and lies. And so we really are the leaders of this transformation, because the leaders that we have today are leaders in the current system. So this is why they are not able to implement what they say. So what they say and what they do are not in alignment. So this is one of the things I pointed out in A Prayer for Compassion, where Pope Francis said all these nice things in the Laudato Si about animals, about how animals should be treated nicely and so on. And then he came to New York City and he had a veal and lobster dinner. So clearly in misalignment with who he says he is. Because that's the system that he is in. That's the system that he's leading. Now you can look at the details of the spiritual shifts on the Vegan World 2026.org website. Where from animal slavery, we're going to move to animal liberation. In fact, it's human, earth, animal liberation. From deliberate cruelty to animals to compassion for all life. And from all our religious divisions that we have today to an acceptance of all faiths and non-belief traditions. Acceptance that they are all about compassion for all life. And so it doesn't really matter the details, because that's the core of what we are all talking about. And from an egocentric society to an ecocentric society, where we are focused on all life and maintaining all life. And from a fear of death to a love of life. So we had a number of spiritual questions, shift questions that came up during our conference. Here are like the top 10. How can we engage all faiths to see that veganism is the essence of the golden rule? How are we going to change religious traditions that believe animals are given to us as food? So we formed a study group around the religious traditions. And how do we convey a message of loving kindness for all beings, so that especially to yoga and meditation teachers and spiritual leaders who teach kindness but eat animals. So it's about overcoming that dissociation, that disconnection that happens. And I think if you probe all of our leaders, you will find that they're justifying on the basis of either the deliberately or unnecessarily, or maybe even saying that the animals are not innocent. So they deserve to be punished because they they did something bad in their past life or something. So anyway, these are the questions that we came up with on the shift. And we are actually now working on an app that will allow people to add questions and to form study groups and do that automatically on the website. So please stay tuned for that. So that should be coming up soon. So here's the work that we did on the Religious Tradition Study Group. And here are the questions that we came up for the new model for what is the new in the vegan world of 2026 and beyond. What would our spiritual basis be? And here are the questions we came up with. How do we do nature stewardship? Was one of the study groups that we formed. How can we heal these negative judgments about religion so that we can preserve their traditions and experiences of connection and praise? So there is a lot of good in the religions that we already have, all the traditions that we have. So how do you preserve the symbolism and the stories and simultaneously make it compatible with the vegan world? So in which we are accepting of all traditions and accepting of the diversity of thought behind religion. So here is the work that we did in this Nature Stewardship Study Group. Anyway, that's all I had today. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to field questions now. We have another about 15 minutes or so.
I have a question.
Yes, Miles.
Good morning, Dr. Rao. Another wonderful presentation. First of all, the plate of food that you showed is so beautiful. Relatively speaking to a plate of meat and a meat diet, the beauty of that plate with the coconut is wonderful. And I think the spiritual presentation of food like that will be very important to get people to see the wonder of the plant-based diet and reaching people with the message. So I just wanted to say that first of all. And then the next point that I would like to make is that there's these stages of consciousness.
Okay.
And conscious comes from the same word as science. The conscience or conscience is thinking with, in other words, thinking with withness, whereas science is just thinking. And when I think about it, there's a lot of thinking going on where there's a very small number of people today who are very much in control of most of the world's wealth, and they're doing their thinking in isolation. And so we need to encourage them to think with withness, think with conscience. And perhaps the answer, and this comes from Carl Jung, and I attribute this to also Skip Conover in his Carl Jung Depth Psychology reading group. But the stages of consciousness very quickly take us from being a child to from where the universe is all in the baby, and then they see parents as gods as the next stage. And then the child grows up and starts thinking about higher spirituality and religions. And anyway, the leaders of today are indeed in charge of that third stage of consciousness, the isms and the religion, and myself included, as a person that was very much involved in Christianity. I've now realized personally, and I speak with humility, that it's not actually all about Jesus in the case of Christianity. It's almost all about Jesus. And that takes me to a higher level of where I feel I am now, which is synchronicity. And synchronicity is defined as the acausal connecting principle. And you started out talking about truth. And truth and love, they go together like this.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's about moving us to these higher levels of consciousness or thinking withness together. So I just ask you to comment on that.
No, that's a great comment. I mean, it is, that's really what it is. It's about aligning ourselves with what has happened and telling ourselves the story that we do belong exactly as we are, and that as a process, as a part of that, we are going to be transforming ourselves and transforming our society to come into alignment with the future of life, the thriving of life for the future. So it is about seeing through things, seeing through the lies that you've been told. I've actually used the 7 chakras as part of as how transformation happens. We start by overcoming our fear of the change. So that's the first chakra. And then we overcome our guilt for what has happened in the past, and then the shame, and then the grief of what is of all that we have destroyed, and then overcoming the lies and the delusions. Delusions are really lies that others have been telling us that we bought into. And then finally, the attachment to the old way of living. So when we overcome our 7 chakras, open our 7 chakras to change, then we transform ourselves. So, and it's transforming ourselves to come into alignment with the truth, with the reality, with the facts.
Yeah. Wonderful. Just one comment too. I think it'd be helpful to put where you have a homo ahimsa, that you actually put the definition that ahimsa is nonviolence. So it's homo nonviolence. I think that'll be helpful for people.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Oh.
Hi, Keith.
Yeah. Okay. I have a couple of questions and comments. First of all, I'm very interested in this app because I remember that there was a great deal of enthusiasm about the study groups after the Mesa conference, and we haven't heard anything since then. And now I understand that the Portland conference isn't happening.
Right.
So I'm wondering how we can sort of get this up, because I think there are people that will be interested in working on spiritual traditions and all kinds of other stuff too.
Right.
And specific, this is just an idle question, sort of. Is anyone working on Buddhism or any particular traditions within Buddhism? I'd be interested in finding out a little more about that.
Yeah, so that was, Bill Tuttle was going to be part of the Portland conference, and he has been working on the Buddhism. But we are going to have a conference in Mesa again in October, so I will send that out next week.
Okay.
And by that time, we will have the app done, and we will have a much better organization around what we need to be doing. We also want to start a project which is about creating all the infrastructure that we need for the new system. So the software infrastructure, and whatever else we need to create, so that so we need to create an app or an ecosystem of apps, so that people, when they use that, they automatically become transformed. So it should become a no-brainer for people. So that's the idea behind creating these apps.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Rebecca, I think you're muted.
Oh, yeah. I had to unmute myself. Well, hello. Thank you very much, Salish. I had two parts. One is if you could say a little bit more about accepting that everything needed to be in the past. So when we look at all the ills in the world and all the suffering, it's real hard when you look at it that way to say, oh, that needed to be.
Right.
And yet, when I look at myself, I have to do the next right thing and I'm compelled to do something. And then I think, well, maybe those people were compelled to do what they had to do.
Right.
But that's one thing. And then I have something about October in a minute.
Okay. Yeah, so that is really about faith. It's about letting go. It's not that, that was a good thing that's happening, because you are trying to change it.
Right.
You are trying to help them change it, right? So it's not about judging things as good or bad, but it's about saying that it is part of the process that everyone had to go through. So faith says that everything happens for the best, right? Everything happened in that order because we don't have full knowledge about everything. So from our perspective, we judge something to be bad or good. But that's our limited perspective. But perhaps that had to happen for the next transformation to occur, which we don't know. So it's about just saying, I don't know, and therefore I'm going to believe that it's okay. So let's just try to fix everything that needs to be fixed and let go of the fruits of our action,
Okay.
which is the message from the Gita, is that you have to act for the good of all, but you have to let go of the fruits of your action because the fruits are not in your hands.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I love that. Thank you. And then in terms of October, Extinction Rebellion has some very big plans that may have some delays in a lot of things coming up in October. And so I would love for that to be coordinated.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that. I mean, I was planning to do it on the last weekend of October so that it coincides with the with Zen nights.
Okay. But yeah,
on Friday and then Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, they've got some, not just a day event, but long event for people to participate in.
Okay.
And I don't know what date. So thank you. That sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll take a look at that.
Thank you.
Madhuri, you had your hands up?
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, when you said the leader's declaration about compassion for animals, something to that tune, is it any particular organization, Hindu organization in India, or what is it? How would one specify, if I'm supposed to share it with somebody, Hindu declaration?
There is a Hindu Declaration on Climate Change that I excerpted from. So there was 3 lines from that. And then the one I showed from Durban, it's the Interfaith Declaration on Climate Change.
Yes.
And that one had this addendum. So it's called the Interfaith Declaration on Climate Change. I don't know if the website is still there, but it was there before.
Okay. So, but if we were to quote any particular Hindu religious leader here, it's how do we say that?
Okay, so the Hindu Declaration on Climate Change was signed by 70 odd Hindu leaders.
Okay.
And if you look I think if you look for Hindu Declaration on Climate Change, you'll find the website.
And the names of the leaders.
The names are there, yes.
Okay.
And you will see that they had, in the declaration, they actually had a specific call for people to adopt a plant-based diet.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay.
So it was, and I think Sri Ravi Shankar signed that too.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, a lot of people signed it. It's just they're not implementing it.
Yeah, I recently visited a Vipassana center and I was pretty disappointed with my discussion there. So it's a question. I mean, it's good that you're going to have a forum where we can share our questions now, so we can deal with them collectively.
Right. Yeah.
And also one more question I had about this B12. Like, when did it start actually, probably you mentioned it and I missed the point. How did B12 start becoming an important part of the nutrition? I mean, how did they realize that this?
B12, okay. People did not know what B12 was until
Yeah.
100 years ago. All they
Right.
knew is that they were getting pernicious anemia, which is, it's a very debilitating disease. And they had no cause for it. They didn't know what the cause was. All they knew is that when they ate a little bit of animal foods, it went away. Right? So that was the empirical observation. In fact, that's something that Gandhi also went through. He tried to go vegan several times and he failed. And every time his doctor told him to take some animal food and it went away. His went away.
Okay.
So I think it was B12. I mean, that's my guess. Okay, that's my theory. As to why
that's right.
feeling that way. It got isolated in the 1920s as it was identified as a protein that was causing pernicious anemia, the lack of which was causing pernicious anemia in the 1920s. And two scientists got a Nobel Prize for that. And then in the 1960s, it was the structure was identified through X-ray crystallography by Dorothy Hodgkin. So she got a Nobel Prize for that. And after that, it became easy for people to manufacture it. So we started having B12 supplements. People knew, this was the cause of this debilitating disease.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, sir.
So I think even the discovery of B12 tells me that we were meant to be ignorant about it for so many years, and we were eating these animals thinking that that's the only way to become healthy, right? So we were forced to be predators in that sense. Right?
Exactly.
So we were forced to be predators in that sense, and now we have been given this knowledge so that we can wake up and become caretakers.
Exactly.
So it's if you look at the beauty of what is happening, it's like everything is put in place.
Yes.
For us to become this caretaker species.
Yes. We are looking forward to interacting with you next weekend. We are having a good audience and we are getting some environmentalists on board. So yes, we are really looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Good. So it's about 6 a.m, right?
Yes, for you, 6 a.m.
Okay.
Yes.
Sailesh?
Yes.
One big concern that I have about all of the movement to be able to purify the planet and make us whole again. Today's was about spiritual aspect of it, but there's also the culture I feel needs to be able to be changed. And that's why I put up the idea about the World Fast Organization. And also one other element is character development, because our schools and our society does not develop character, does not develop compassion, does not develop love. There's a number of character development programs that are effective, and by far this one called Living Values Education had 100% reduction in violence at a refugee camp in Thailand within 2 years of its implementation.
Wonderful.
The two values that are stimulated first and worked on first are love and peace. And when you have those, the other values start to be able to come in because they just start manifesting more and more. And there's age appropriate all the way up to even a parenting book, because most people really don't know how to parent except the way their parents parented. Right. And sometimes that's with a whip and whatever it might be. So without having that included in our work, how can we really change life to be able to be the way we envision it?
Right. Yeah. No, that's a very good point. I mean, education again. I think Jackie is on this, and she has been working on entire curriculum that needs to change. The entire school system needs to change. So yeah, we are talking about, if you look at our website, veganworld2026.org, you will see that we are looking at every aspect of this transformation that needs to happen. And education is it's a very big part of it. Yeah, because the entire system, the education system, everything is designed today in the system of normalized violence, which is about basically preserving the wealth for a few people.
Oh yeah.
It's really, all of us are focusing all of our resources to make sure that Jeff Bezos keeps his $150 billion. It's like that's our purpose in life, right now.
Yeah.
So it's about transforming that to a new way of living, where it's about all of life,
Yes. Yes.
right? Instead of a few people. Yeah. So the second question that you sent me privately, yes, all of this, all the previous webinars are on our website, climatehealers.org/webinar. And this one also will be on it. I'm recording it, so I'll put it up.
Your visuals are very effective in from your list to whatever it might be. And everybody needs the visual. And I'm so happy that you're doing this great work. I appreciate it.
Thank you so
One of
much.
the other things about this character is not just in education, but it has to be character inclusion in businesses, in government, in every aspect of life.
Every aspect, yes, absolutely, yeah. So we are thinking about, certified compassionate organizations, certified compassionate corporations.
Yes.
So everyone has to buy into this compassionate lifestyle.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Madhvi, you had another question, or you're done?
I'm done.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you all very much. I'll be repeating this again at 9 p.m.
Thank you so much, and keep up. I don't have to tell you to keep up the good work because you're doing it all the time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.